Hey y'all, it's Brittany and welcome back finally to another episode of Snapped in Skincare, also known as Clean Skin Dirty Deeds. Now this week we'll be talking all about Carolyn Warmus. Now Carolyn Warmus was a school teacher and she was 25 years old at the time that the crime that she was alleged to have committed occurred. She was accused and convicted of taking the life of Jeanne Solomon, the wife of Paul Solomon, who was 40 at the time and was also the lover of Carolyn Warmus. So this is the classic fatal attraction effect. So if you want to hear all the details about this case that have people divided and all types of conversations are happening around this case, but if you want to hear more about it, stay tuned. Before we hop into this new case, I really want to thank everyone for their patience, their grace, and staying with me through my hiatus. Let's call it a hiatus because that's what it was, but allowing me to really focus on my family, take care of everyone and myself. We are still working through health and getting better and caring for one another. But I definitely felt like it was time to get back in front of this camera and tell you guys some more stories and have some more discussions, because we need to keep those discussions going. We need to keep thought-provoking conversations happening. So wanted to get back to you guys. So thank you for everyone who stuck by me. For those of you who are subscribed and are waiting for a new upload, thank you guys so much. I truly do appreciate it. For those of you who are just finding my channel and you have not yet subscribed, go ahead and make sure you subscribe. I have so many amazing things planned for 2022 going forward, including consistency. I've gotten a schedule nailed down, so plan on having uploads every single week. So make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell because you don't want to miss any new videos. Also, make sure you like the video. It really means the world to me when you like the video, when you're commenting down in those comments. Interaction is key for growth here on YouTube. So thank you so much in advance. Now let's get on to this story. Now, Carolyn Warmus was born on January 8th of 1964, and she was born to a self-made millionaire father who made his coins in the insurance field, and her mother was a school teacher. With that being said, she grew up in a pretty privileged area named Birmingham, Michigan. Now, at the age of 8, Carolyn's parents did divorce, and I won't ignore that and the effects that it has on women as they get older, people in general as they get older when their parents divorce at a young age, that age where they're still old enough to remember what it's like to have a combined, united family, and then to still remember what it feels like when your family essentially splits into two. Now, Carolyn still went on to do well. She went and got a degree in psychology, and after getting that degree in psychology, she decided that she was going to move to New York and to continue her education at Columbia University. And Columbia was where she ended up earning her master's degree in elementary education before starting her career as an elementary school teacher. Now, in her youthful love life, her dating life while she was in New York, she had a couple issues, I would say. She tended to have a little bit of a stalkerish tendency in her relationships that she built. She tended to stalk her lovers when they didn't want to be with her anymore or they weren't as interested as she was. She would even use her privilege and her coins, her parents' coins essentially, to hire private investigators to stalk or follow or investigate these men who no longer showed interest in her. And one private investigator who plays a significant role in this case, his name is Vincent Parco, and he had initially been hired by Carolyn Warmus to follow a bartender in New York that she was initially dealing with, dating, and he kind of stopped showing interest in her, so she hired him to see what he was doing. This is the kind of dating behaviors Carolyn exhibited at a young age. Now, beside all of the dating life stuff, she ended up getting her first job in 1987 as an elementary school teacher in New York. And this is where, according to Carolyn, she started to live her best life. She was 23. It was the 80s, you know, it was love all around, that kind of thing. So she was doing her. And this is actually where she met Paul Solomon. Now, Paul Solomon was a fellow teacher at the school that Carolyn was teaching at. And according to numerous reports, Carolyn will tell you otherwise, but according to numerous reports, when she initially met Paul at work, she became very familiar with his family as well, but that included his wife, Betty Jean, and his daughter as well. And it was said that she being Carolyn, was more like a role model or a big sister to Paul's daughter because she was so much younger than Paul. Again, Paul was 40 and she was 23 when she first started working there and 25 when all of this humbug occurred. Now, on the other hand, according to Carolyn, that was not the case. According to Carolyn, she didn't really meet Paul's family until a couple years after they met. Now, her story goes that one day when she had recently started in her job, I think she was still 23 or so at the time, Paul had come up to her in the teacher's lounge, if y'all remember what those were. But she was in the teacher's lounge. He had come up to her and said, hey, a bunch of the other teachers are going to go hang out at this bar after work just to kind of relax and kick it. Do you want to come along? So she said, okay. You know, being new, she wanted to kind of build those relationships and make new friends. And she went to the bar. And she says, unbeknownst to her, when she arrived, she was the only other teacher there except for Paul. It was just her and Paul. So basically he had tricked her into having drinks with him, going out on some type of date with him by using coworkers as an excuse. And she said they dated and they were in each other's lives for a couple years, I believe. And after they were already dating, she found out that he was actually married and had a child. Now, she says by that time, she was already basically in too deep. They loved each other at that point. Either way, it was weird because he started inviting her to family dinners with his wife and his daughter, and admitted by her, she said it was really weird, but she did it anyway. And she knew it was wrong to be dating a married man who, if you're at these dinners with the family, you can clearly see whether or not they are on their road to divorce or whatever the case may be. And it didn't look like they were. But Paul told her that they had an open marriage and that they were just waiting until his daughter, who was a few years away from college, once she got into college, they were going to go their separate ways. So that is what she was holding on to. And she figured, okay, it's the 80s. Open relationship is not uncommon. So I guess I'll just roll with it for the time being. And it was also said that Betty Jean herself had been seeing another man for 8 years. This is according to Paul. So this was all things that he was telling Carolyn so that she would feel comfortable with the idea of the open relationship. Kind of like, hey, my wife has been doing it too, so there's nothing wrong with it. Now, fast forward about 2 years to January 15th of 1989 at about 11:40 in the evening. Paul comes home and he unfortunately finds that his wife has been beaten and shot and left for dead. Now, when police arrive, they start to document the scene and they are taking pictures and evidence, and they notice that there is a glove that is in very close proximity to Betty Jean's body. Now, unfortunately, the police made a grave mistake because they decided that they were not going to collect this glove as evidence during their initial crime scene investigation. And also, when the coroner comes in and takes a look at Betty Jean's body, he sets time of death between 2 p.m. and 6 p.m. on that day. Now, later, when detectives sit down and have a conversation with Paul, they find out that he came in, he found her face down, and he essentially called the police. But it was known that when they talked to him, he had no blood on him at the time. So detectives found out that the police officers that first responded to the scene actually allowed Paul to go wash up, wash his hands, change out of his bloody clothes so that he could be presentable before going and talking to detectives. So now they can't test his hands for gunshot residue. They can't test his clothes. They don't know what's going on with the clothes. They have nothing further that they can move on with when it comes to Paul Solomon, Betty's husband. But what they did find out in talking to Paul is that he was a serial cheater. He constantly had affairs while being married to Betty Jean. And Carolyn was just one of those affairs that he decided to have. Now, obviously, he was the first initial suspect of his wife's murder, but he had an alibi. His alibi was that he had gone that day to the bowling alley with some friends, and then after he went to the bowling alley, he actually met up for drinks with Miss Carolyn Warmus. So police felt like, for whatever reason, that was enough, and that they were going to look for other suspects. So they go on to talk to Carolyn herself. Now, when they talk to Carolyn, they find out that, yes, they did have plans to go meet with each other at a hotel bar for Carolyn's birthday that afternoon. And before they went into the bar, they had sex in the car and then proceeded to go in and have some drinks and enjoy themselves. As all of this is happening, Paul decides that he doesn't want to date Carolyn anymore. So he chooses to move on with another teacher from the school that they both work at by the name of Barbara Baller. Now, he and Barbara were supposed to go off on this romantic vacation to Puerto Rico. Somehow, Carolyn finds out where they're going, when they're going, where they're staying, what room they're in, and she follows them. She follows them and she calls him in the room constantly for him to come talk to her in Puerto Rico, and he ignores her. He doesn't answer. He does not come down to have a conversation with her. He wants nothing to do with her. On the other hand, we have Carolyn telling us that no. He invited me down there with both of them. Don't worry, I was supposed to be there. He knew I was coming. When I was calling him, I was telling him, what flight I was on, what time my flight was landing. It was nothing like he's making it sound. And my question there is, if he was planning on you coming and he invited you and his new mistress knew you were coming, why did he have no contact with you once you arrived? Now, detectives keep on digging into Carolyn's past and in all her business. And they find another guy that had taken a restraining order out on her for stalking him as well. Now, according to Carolyn, it was kind of a mutual restraining order. She took one out on him, he took one out on her because they both had issues. Detectives also talked to her PI, Vincent Parco. And when they talked to Parco, they find out that she had purchased a .25 caliber Beretta from him along with a silencer very recently. And it turns out that this is the exact type of gun that was used to kill Betty Jeanne Solomon. And it was also said that she had purchased bullets from a gun shop in New Jersey for this gun as well. Now, when the police go to check with the gun shop, they say, yes, we do have record of a woman buying these specific bullets from us on this day. However, the person that was supposedly buying these bullets, according to the identification, was not Carolyn, but Carolyn's co-worker, Lisa Katai. And that's who they had on record buying these bullets. They showed the people in the gun shop pictures of Carolyn to see if they could identify her as this person, and they couldn't for sure say whether or not it was Carolyn that bought the bullets. Now, detectives did go and talk to Lisa herself to find out if she actually went to this gun shop in New Jersey and bought these bullets on this specific day that Betty Jeanne was killed. And when they talk to Lisa, they find out that her identification was actually stolen that summer before all of this happened, while she was working a summer teaching job. Who was her coworker when all of this got stolen? Carolyn Warmus. And it was also said that they look very similar, apparently. Carolyn and Lisa look similar enough to where the police felt like Carolyn could have walked into the gun shop using Lisa's identification to purchase these, and no one would have batted an eye at it. With all that being said, and although all of the evidence the police have is circumstantial at this point, on February 2nd of 1990, Carolyn Warmus is arrested for the murder of Jeanne Solomon. Now, during Carolyn's trial, the private investigator that Carolyn had hired since her teenage years, Vincent Parco, he testified in the court that, again, he had sold Carolyn the very same type of gun that was used to kill Jeanne Solomon. She had told him that she got rid of the gun, she threw it on some parkway. And the reason that he didn't say anything before was because he was afraid that he was going to be incriminating himself, which was right, and that he didn't want to get himself in trouble. So in return for his testimony in this case, Vincent got, you guessed it, immunity. Now, Jeanne's husband, Paul, also got immunity from any involvement, any charges, any of that, for testifying in this case as well against Carolyn. Now, prosecutors also presented the court with a phone record, or what they were calling a phone bill, from Carolyn's phone company, her home phone. You know, they still had those back then. It basically said that Carolyn had made a phone call to this specific gun shop in New Jersey where she was said to have bought the bullets, and she called them from her home phone on the day that Jeanne Solomon was killed. The defense, however, produced their own phone bill from the same phone company that magically does not have that same phone call on it. Everything else is there except for this phone call to the gun shop. So whose document is real? Whose document is fake? What is going on here? Either way, the judge decides that the only one that will be admitted in court as evidence is the prosecution's copy that has the phone call from the gun shop, or to the gun shop, on record. And as I mentioned before, nobody could identify her at the gun shop as being the person who purchased these bullets, but I guess that didn't matter. Also, they could not positively say that the shell casings that were found at the scene of the crime were the same type of bullets that would have been sold at this gun shop that day. So still no real hard evidence either way. Now, there was also a 911 call, which police believed that it was actually Jeanne Solomon that was calling for help in the middle of her attack. So on the call, they hear a woman basically saying that I'm being attacked, and then it says he or she is trying to kill me. So that is the note that the 911 operator took down. She couldn't really tell if the woman was saying he or she, and this opened up the possibility that it could have been a he instead of a she that was attacking Jeanne at this time. Now, the call abruptly ended. So when the 911 operators and police tried to reverse kind of search the phone number to see what address was tied to it, the wrong address was tied to it. So they never found Jeanne before her husband did. Now, the timing of the call was also interesting, because if this was Jeanne on the call, then she would not have died between 2 and 6. So the coroner had to change his time from 2 to 6 p.m. that day to her being attacked and killed between 6 and 8 p.m. that evening. This was a problem for the prosecution, because if Carolyn was the person who did it, there is record on their phone documents that she made a call at 6:45. She made a call, and after she made this phone call, she was on her way to meet Paul, and she did meet Paul, and they did have drinks. The only thing that the prosecution had to say back to that was, oh, that's fake. That call is fake. Needless to say, The trial against Carolyn Warmus was a hung jury, and it was 8-4 hung. Now in 1992, the prosecution, they did move forward retrying the case against Carolyn Warmus, and they had the same evidence for the most part, except for one thing. It was the glove. The glove that was at the scene next to Betty Jean's body, but the police never collected it as evidence. Initially, Paul, her husband, had ended up giving the glove to police to run some basic testing on it to see if there was any evidence on this glove that would help the case. When nothing came back from it, apparently there was only specks of blood on this glove. They gave it back to Paul. They didn't keep it as evidence. They didn't hold it for future testing, for advancement in DNA testing or any of that, because at this point DNA was around. It's in its beginning stages, the infancy of DNA. But forward thinking detectives and officers would have probably thought to keep it for future advancements. They gave it back to her husband. When it came time for the first trial, both the prosecution and the defense wanted this glove back to do some additional testing. And Paul said he couldn't find it. He can't figure out where it is. He doesn't remember where it went. It's lost. So they didn't have it for the first trial. When the second trial rolls around, lo and behold, here's the glove. And a lot of people felt like at this point, was it because Paul was the person who did it and he's trying to make sure that this time the case doesn't end with a hung jury? Don't know. But magically he finds the glove and turns it over to the prosecution. Prosecution and defense both want to test this glove for the second trial. The judge says absolutely not. There is no clear chain of custody. We don't know how this was kept. We don't even know if it was the same glove. So no testing, but the judge did allow them to submit the glove itself as a piece of evidence in the trial. It was said by detectives that this go round, the glove had a whole lot more blood on it than it initially had. So they don't know where it came from. Was it just an oversight and maybe there was more blood the first time around and they just didn't notice it? Is it even the same glove? They don't know. But the glove is admitted as evidence as being there at the scene. And this is important because although they can't test the glove, they do have a receipt of a few months earlier of Carolyn purchasing same brand, same type of glove as this new glove that's in evidence, showing that she could have possibly been on the scene. She has gloves just like this. Again, we don't know if this was the actual glove that was there initially. You can't tell from the pictures that they took as evidence initially at the crime scene. It's not documented. They didn't collect it as evidence. So we don't know if it's the same glove or not. Even with just circumstantial evidence, this time around in June of 1992, Carolyn Warmus was convicted of second-degree murder and also the illegal possession of a firearm. And she was sentenced to 25 years to life with the possibility of parole as early as 2017. Now, while Carolyn was in prison, she did develop a brain tumor, and it was said to be not a malignant brain tumor, but still a health deteriorating brain tumor nonetheless. So she was planning to have surgery to remove the tumor while she was still in prison. I didn't find anything as to whether or not she actually had the surgery, but she was clearly declining in health while in prison. During her last few years in prison, a defense attorney and also an exoneree by the name of Jeffrey Deskovic. He's a justice activist. He was once wrongfully convicted for murder and rape, and he was later exonerated by DNA. And he now spends his millions of dollars that he got as compensation for his wrongful conviction to help others who he feels are wrongfully imprisoned, wrongfully convicted, to help to exonerate them as well. So he jumped on to help her with her case, and he brought on another fellow exoneree by the name of John O'Hara, who's also a defense attorney now, and a attorney by the name of Dennis Kelly. And they were all working on her case to get her exonerated of these charges. But in 2019, she was finally paroled from prison. Once she got out, they all continued to work to try to prove her innocence, obviously. She never changed her story that she was not responsible for taking the life of Betty Jeanne Solomon. The people who followed this case obviously felt like there were many other viable suspects, including the husband for obvious reasons, and also Vincent Parco. They felt like he could have been involved in some kind of way. Him, not so much for me, because I don't know what he would get from it unless he was being paid by Paul Solomon to get rid of his wife, but then that goes back to Paul. So who knows? Now, after she was released from prison, a motion was filed for additional testing to be done on the glove, but not just the glove, some other items as well that were found at the scene of the crime. The judge had initially denied the motion and was not going to allow additional testing, and Carolyn's team filed an appeal, and before that appeal was set to be argued in court, the DA at the time said, you know what, let's go ahead and allow them to do the testing. Let's have some testing done on the glove. But there was also not just the glove, there was a tote bag at the scene as well. And not only was there a tote bag at the scene, there was semen present inside of the victim that was never tested. Collected, but never tested. Why on earth this was never tested, and why on earth prosecution never tested it and just held it in and of itself is a crime. But the DA allowed for that to be tested as well. Now, this just took place in May of 2021, so this year. So there has been no update yet on what the outcome is of the testing that they did. So if I hear anything, I'll update you guys on that as well. But as of right now, she is out of prison as of 27 years being served, and they're still working to clear her name. It's to be noted that Vincent Parco has also found himself in prison for tampering with a witness in a separate case. So everybody's not as, up and up as they seem. And that is the case of Carolyn Warmus. I'm definitely on the fence because sis had some real sketchy behaviors, some real stalker-like behaviors that typically lead to these types of things. We see this happen on shows like Snapped all the time, where these things tend to escalate. The stalkerish behavior turns into other things, including taking the life of someone else. I also feel like there is some circumstantial evidence that does just generally point to Carolyn in this case, but I also feel like there is not enough evidence for her to have been convicted of doing anything. I think there is just as much evidence on a husband as there is for her, which is not very much. That's the whole point. The documents that the prosecution presented as well as the defense presented from the same source supposedly just makes it that much more murky. The lack of testing for the physical evidence that was actually present on the scene by the prosecution just tells me that there was tunnel vision in the case, where they just didn't care. They felt like, we know who it is. We don't need to do anything else. We don't need to do a real investigation. Why would we do that? We know who it is. This makes sense to me. So let's move forward with it. I think that's unfortunate because it muddies your ability to really convict them with the evidence that I found. And like I tell y'all all the time, I use Snap as a catalog of cases to look up. That's the whole point of this series. But I do not use Snapped as the source of information. I actually research and find other sources for information that are much more credible and much more complete sources of information. And there is just not enough evidence for me to say 100% that I feel like she did it. But I can't say that she didn't either. There's not enough evidence for anything. I want to hear you guys' thoughts. What do you guys think? Do you think she's guilty? Do you think she's innocent? I'm finding these stories where the fairness of the trial is not happening. The meeting the threshold to prove someone is guilty is not happening in these cases. I'm seeing so much more of they're guilty until proven innocent, which is not the way that our justice system works. So I want to hear what you guys think. Am I crazy? Am I missing something? Obviously, before we go, I got to tell you my scent of the day. It has been a struggle around this household with everybody being sick except for me. I'm the only one who is not sick. So obviously I'm the caretaker, the cleaner, the sanitizer, all of the above. So it's been stressful. So I felt like today I needed to give myself some self-care, B, take care of this mask knee that's happening all in this area because it's not cute. I also just wanted to make myself feel good. So today the fragrance that I'm wearing is going to be the YSL. This is the Libre Intense fragrance, and I love this for everyday fragrance, but also for going out. It can do both. It has a beautiful fragrance up front, and then it dries down to this beautifully soft, sweet fragrance as well. So I just love this fragrance. I definitely think this will be my signature scent for the fall and winter months, especially. Maybe able to sneak it in for some spring, but love it. Let me know if you guys have tried this fragrance as well, what your thoughts are on it. I am obsessed. But that is all, y'all. So it's been real. Expect much more to come, much more quickly from me from now on. But until next time, y'all, it's been fun. It's been real. Love you guys. Bye.